Have you ever stayed home alone and felt like the house was listening with you? Every small sound becomes louder when nobody else is there. Every shadow looks wrong. And once something happens inside your own home, you never feel safe the same way again. Tonight I have 3 unsettling stories about people who were completely alone when things started to go wrong. This is with Anna 7, and these are 3 true home alone horror stories. Daniel, I still remember when I was living alone in a small upstairs apartment over an old hardware store in Ohio. The building had been there for decades, and it showed in every corner. The narrow wooden stairs outside creaked loudly enough that I could always tell when someone was coming up. Below me was the shop owned by an older man named Frank, who always closed exactly at 6 in the evening. After that, the whole place felt like it stopped breathing. I worked late shifts at a diner and usually got home around midnight, tired, smelling like grease and coffee. My routine never changed: shower, quick food, some TV until I fell asleep. But that night felt different from the moment I parked my car. The street was too quiet. No wind, no dogs, just a heavy silence that followed me up the stairs. When I opened my apartment door, something felt off immediately. The kitchen light was on, and I was sure I had turned it off before leaving. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it, trying to convince myself I was just tired. I checked everything anyway: closet, bathroom, under the bed, even behind the door, like I expected to find someone hiding. Nothing was wrong, but my body wouldn't relax. It felt like the air inside the apartment was slightly colder than it should be. Around 1:30 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside, slow and heavy. One step, then a pause. Another step, then another pause. I muted the TV and listened. The footsteps stopped right in front of my door. No knock, no voice, just silence so complete it felt unnatural. I slowly moved closer and looked through the peephole, but all I saw was darkness, because something was blocking it from the outside, too close to even reflect light properly. I stayed frozen there for what felt like minutes, not breathing properly. Then the shape outside shifted slightly, and I saw part of a shoulder in a dark jacket before it turned and went back down the stairs. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, listening to every sound in the building. The next day I told Frank, and he said nobody should have been in the building. Maybe someone got the wrong address. I wanted to believe that. But 2 nights later it happened again. Same slow steps, same stop in front of my door. This time I stayed in the kitchen, holding a knife just in case. And I remember thinking how stupid that felt, because a knife against whatever that was meant nothing. Then I heard the doorknob slowly move, left then right, like someone was testing it carefully, not rushing, almost patient. I shouted that I would call the police, and the footsteps immediately ran down the stairs, fast this time, like they had never been calm at all. When police came, they found nothing. They said maybe kids or someone drunk. But I knew what I heard. The next night, I placed a chair under the door handle before sleeping. I also turned all the lights on, even though it made me feel exposed. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a strange scraping sound, not outside, inside the apartment. I opened my eyes and saw the chair slowly dragging across the floor toward the door. Something thin had been slipped underneath and hooked around one of its legs, pulling it away inch by inch. I couldn't even scream at first. My body just locked completely. Then the pressure suddenly stopped, and I heard fast footsteps running down the stairs outside like something had been disturbed. Police later found bent wire marks under the door and said someone had been trying to manipulate the latch from outside. Frank eventually admitted there was an old maintenance hatch connecting parts of the building. Someone had been hiding inside after closing time, watching for when I would return. I moved out within a week. But even now, I still remember that feeling of standing inside my own home knowing I wasn't alone. Sarah, I still remember when I was living alone in a small house in North Carolina after a breakup. I kept telling people I liked the peace, but the truth is I started noticing how silence can feel heavier than noise. The house was a narrow 2-story place with a small backyard facing a line of trees. Every house around looked almost identical, which made nights feel even more empty, like life had been copied and left unfinished. I came home every day around 6 from work and tried to ignore the feeling that something in the house was slightly off, not broken, just wrong in a way I couldn't explain. One Friday, I noticed my bedroom window was open when I got back. I was certain I had closed it because rain was expected. Nothing seemed stolen, so I closed it and convinced myself it was just forgetfulness. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside and left without taking anything. The next day, a photo frame on the stairs was turned facing the wall, which I blamed on myself again. But the feeling of being watched started settling in slowly, like something patient building up over time. Sunday night, I went to the kitchen for water and found every cabinet door open, top and bottom. And it wasn't just open randomly. It looked like someone had opened them carefully and walked away. I stood there for a full minute before closing them one by one, listening to every small sound the house made while I did it. On Monday, I bought a cheap security camera and placed it in the living room pointing at the stairs just to calm myself. That night, I stayed up watching movies, but I kept glancing at the stairs, even when I tried not to. Nothing happened until 2:15 in the morning, when my phone vibrated with a motion alert. I opened the app, expecting a glitch, but what I saw made my stomach drop completely. A person was standing halfway down my stairs, staring directly at the camera, completely still. Tall, thin, face hidden in darkness, but clearly facing the lens like they knew it was there. I ran upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and called the police whispering because I was terrified of being heard. While I was on the phone, I heard slow footsteps coming down the stairs again. But this time, they didn't stop immediately. They lingered, as if waiting to see what I would do. Then silence. Police arrived within minutes and searched everything. No one was there. Every door and window was locked. But they found something worse. The attic hatch above the hallway was slightly open. Inside there were bottles, food wrappers, and blankets arranged in a way that showed someone had been living there deliberately, not hiding randomly, watching when I left, and coming down only when I was home to move things and study my routine. I left that house the same night and never went back alone. Michael, I still remember when I was staying at my aunt's house while she traveled for 2 weeks in Pennsylvania. It was a place at the end of a long road surrounded by woods, with only one distant neighbor across a field. During the day it felt peaceful, but at night it felt completely cut off from the world, like the forest was closer than it should be. She had 2 large dogs and a landline because cell service barely worked inside. The first nights passed normally, but then on a Thursday night around 11, I heard 3 slow knocks at the back door. I looked through the glass and saw only darkness and moving trees. I opened it slightly thinking the dogs wanted out, but there was no one there, just cold air and silence so thick it felt wrong. Friday night it happened again, but at the front door this time, same 3 slow taps. I checked every window and saw nothing, but the dogs were now acting different, standing still behind me, staring at empty corners of the house, and growling softly like they could hear something I couldn't. I told myself it was animals outside or wind hitting wood. But on Saturday night, everything changed when the power went out across the entire area without warning. The house went completely dark in a second. I lit candles and sat in the living room with the dogs pressed close to me, trying to stay calm. Then the knocking started again. 3 taps on the back door, then 3 on the kitchen window, then 3 on the front door, moving slowly around the house in a full circle like something was measuring the walls. I called emergency services while hearing footsteps outside on the porch boards and scratching near the bedroom window like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. One of the dogs suddenly screamed and backed away, as if something had gotten too close, and I remember feeling my heart drop because even the animals understood something I didn't. Minutes later, police headlights flooded the windows as they arrived and searched the property. They found a man hiding under the back deck, covered in mud and leaves, with a backpack containing food, rope, gloves, and printed bus schedules. He had been watching the house long enough to know my aunt was away, and that I was staying there instead. Later, the officer told me the knocking was likely him trying to see where I was moving inside the house and whether I would come outside. And since that night, I never ignore 3 slow knocks again, because sometimes they are not just sounds. They are questions waiting for an answer. If you made it to the end, let me know which story disturbed you the most tonight. Story 1, Story 2, or Story 3. And if you enjoy true horror stories like these, make sure to subscribe to with Anna 7, because there are many more coming soon. Turn off the lights, check your locks, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.